Okay, we are working on right triangles. So in the first question, we have geometric mean. The reason I know it's the geometric mean is looking at it, I have a hypotenuse here and an altitude drawn to it. So it's asking us for the length of AC. So that's going to be the 4 and the 6 for the repeating pieces with it. Okay, so when it's an outside piece, that's the part that repeats. So I'll call that x, and then it's 4 and the whole thing, which is 10. So x squared equals 40. So you're looking for the square root of 40. I know that breaks into 4 times 10. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 10 is an irrational number, so that's why it's choice 2. You could also type this into the calculator as the square root of 40 and then see which one has a matching decimal if you're not sure how to simplify the radical. In question 2, we have another geometric mean question, the altitude drawn to the hypotenuse. So UT is 12 and RT, which is the entire thing, is 42. So I'm going to subtract and label my 30 as well. Which value of H will make it a right triangle? So again, H is the repeating part. And then because it's the middle piece, you need the 2 parts, which are 12 and 30. You won't use the 42 in this circumstance. So H squared equals 12 times 30, which is 360. And then you take the square root of that. So this time I'll show that part. So if I take the square root of 360, I get 18.973, yada, 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 yada. So what I would do is I would go through all of these and I would type in 6 times the square root of 3 times 6. That's 10 something. So then I would try again with 6 times the square root of 10. And that gave me the exact identical decimal. So that's how I would get that without simplifying the radical. All right, looks like another geometric mean question. Which lengths would not produce an altitude that measures 6 radical 2? So altitude is this part, the 6 radical 2. Okay. So basically, they're saying what 2 measures for AD and DB would not make that true. So I need to figure out what these 2 numbers have to multiply to. And because of the geometric mean, I know they have to multiply to the same thing as 6 radical 2 times itself. So 6 radical 2 times itself is 72. So now I'm just going to multiply them all. 2 times 36 is 72. 3 times 24 is 72. 6 times 12, that seems like it's going to be a little high. I'm double checking. Oh, no. Okay. And then 8 times 17 is definitely not going to be 72 in that case. 136. So that's why it's choice 4, because all the rest of them, if they were here and here, they would multiply to be 72, making a true statement. In question 4, we have a screen with a ratio of 16 to 9. The length of the diagonal is the television screen size. Determine states the nearest inch, the screen size, if it has a height of 20.6 inches. So I'm going to make similar triangles. The reason I'm making triangles again is they told you it is a right triangle with a 16 to 9 ratio. I'm going to make a similar right triangle with a 20.6 height. So that would go with the 9. Just making sure that it said with the height. So yes, 9 is the height. So x is what I'm trying to find. So this will be a ratio of 9 over 16 equals 20.6 over x. I cross multiply. 20.6 times 16 is 329.6. That equals 9x. I'm running out of room on the right side. I would then divide that by 9 and get 36.62 with the 2 repeating. Nearest inch would be 37 inches when I round that appropriately. Okay, next question. We have a diagram. We have everything labeled on there. As you read through it, they told you it's perpendicular. Um, and now they want to know if the path from the park ranger station to the campground is 0.55, as they labeled it, determine in state to the nearest hundredth of a mile, the distance between the park ranger station and the lifeguard chair. So again, I would just double check here. The lifeguard chair is L, and the park ranger station, the line of sight from the park ranger station to the lifeguard chair, L and P. Okay, so is this X? Let's just double check that really quick. Park ranger station to the campground is 0.55 miles. Determine in state to the nearest hundredth of a mile the distance between the park ranger station and the lifeguard chair. Campground. What's F? The first aid station. So this is just Pythagorean theorem for this first part. So this would just be x squared plus 0.22 squared equals 0.55 squared. Because they're just looking for that distance between the two. Oh, that should be a 2.5, a 2.2. So 0.25 squared is 0.0625, and 0.55 squared is 0.3025. I'm going to subtract 0.0625 from both sides and get 0.24. And then I will take the square root of that. And it gives me 0.48989, some other numbers after that, to the nearest hundredth. So that would be 0.49 for the first answer to this. The first aid station to the campground is at least 1.5 miles. Is he correct? So he's saying from here all the way to the campground. So I'll call that Y. And now I'm going to use geometric mean for that one. So I'm using the outside, meaning I'm going to use this part of the 0.25, and I'm going to use the entire thing of Y. So 0.55 is the repeating piece. Y is what I'm looking for. That's the entire distance, and 0.25 is the other part that I need. So 0.3025 equals 0.25y. That's a 5. Divide by 0.25 on both sides. And 0.3025 divided by, there we go, 0.25. And that's 1.21. Is he correct? So no, Gerald is not correct. You have to answer it with a no. But because it says justify, your work justifies it, having found the 1.21. If it said explain, you would have to explain the entire process, but it didn't. So we're good. All right, for this next one, this should be something you're very comfortable with. Okay, this is trigonometry, so SOHCAHTOA. Which expression is always equivalent to sine x when the angle's in between 0 and 90? It's the fact that cosine and sine, when they are equal, always add to 90. So it would be that one right there. That's something they like to ask. And this next one, they're having you find the height of the tree, and they're telling you a point 20 feet from the base of the tree. Okay, so this is going to be a tangent problem. So tangent of 34 equals x over 20, and then you would multiply on both sides. So x equals tangent of 34 times 20. You would type it into your calculator just like that. All of the calculators for the Regents exam will be in degree mode already to go. And then it's just going to be that simple. So I am getting mine up right now. Attempting to type this in, and times 20. I need to put this. So like I was saying, yours is going to be in degree mode already. Mine currently is not, so I'm just switching that really quick. There we go. So it's 13.5. Okay, the next one, cosine A. What is sine B? So remember, cosine A and sine B are equal values because the angles add to 90. So this is just asking you which one's the same. I know that they're equal this time because it's not talking about the angle. It's just talking about the values of cosine A and sine B, which are the same. If it was asking for A or B, that's when I add to 90. We have two similar triangles shown. If tangent of theta is 3/7, what's the value of x, the nearest tenth? So tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that means this is 3 and this is 7. So 3 corresponds with 2.4 and 7 corresponds with x. They're looking for you to solve for x. So, so 3x equals whatever 7 times 2.4 is, which I'm going to tell you momentarily. That's 16.8. And then we will divide that by 3. 16.8 divided by 3. 5.6. There it is. Always double check. That's what you were looking for. Okay. Equilateral triangle has side lengths of 20. What is the height? So I would draw this picture because it makes way more sense when you do, in my opinion. An equilateral triangle will look like that. The height of it will go directly through the middle, making a right triangle, with this side being 10, this being 20, and that's what they're asking you for. There's multiple different ways to do this because you do know that this is a 60-degree angle, so you could use trigonometry, but I would just use Pythagorean theorem. So 10 squared plus x squared equals 20 squared, because 20 is my hypotenuse. 400, this is 100 plus x squared, so x squared equals 300. Take the square root on both sides, and the square root of 300 is approximately 17.3. There we go. All right, in triangle ABC, the complement, so that means adds to 90 of angle B is angle A, so that means sine and cosine are equal. Sine A equals cosine B. There it is. Again, they like that question. We have a rectangle shown. What is the perimeter of the rectangle? So they're looking, we need to find both the opposite and the adjacent side, so I'm going to start with the opposite. So, not tangent. Sine of 30 equals x over 12. So we would cross multiply. Sine of 30 times 12 is going to give me 6. And then this is going to end up being, you could do Pythagorean theorem to find it, or you could just quickly do cosine of 30 equals y. We'll call this part y over 12. And when you cross multiply that through, you end up with a decimal, definitely a decimal. So cosine of 30 times 12 is 10.39 something, 3923 equals y. So 2 of those and 2 of these make the perimeter. So that's 12 and 20. 12 and 20 is 32 point, so it's going to be this one roughly, because you're going to add them all up. Again, you're calculating the perimeter, so you would add that up. So 6 plus 6 plus 10 plus 10. In question 8, we have a 20-foot support post leaning against a wall, making a 70-degree angle with the ground. 70 degrees, 20-foot support leaning against a wall. How far up the wall will it reach? So again, this is going to be a SOHCAHTOA question. Sine of 70 equals x over 20. This is the opposite. This is the hypotenuse. That's why I picked sine. And you would cross multiply and get whatever this value ends up being. Sine of 70 times 12 is 18.79. So 18.8 would be the appropriate rounding for that one. We have a right triangle here. What is the value of x? So again, this is just going to be a cosine question. So cosine of 40 equals 14 over x. Now x is on the bottom. This is the first time that's happened on this review. So remember, when that happens, it's always this number divided by the trig function. Always, whenever x is on the bottom. So 40 divided by the cosine of 40. 14 divided by the cosine of 40 is 18.2, so that rounds to 18. All right, we have another right triangle. Which thing's always true? Sine A is equal to cosine B. Again, I'm hoping you're ready for that question. There's always one. It should be a free 2 points if you see that question. All right, next one. Which ratio is always equivalent to the sine of A? So what you want to remember for these is this is just going back to opposite over hypotenuse. So we have BC over AB. That would be the nicest one. Oh, hey, there it is. Opposite over hypotenuse. There it is. But it also could have been DE over AD, just to throw that out there, because they're similar triangles. But luckily, it was the first one I spotted there. Next triangle they gave us, or next problem, they gave us similar triangle, and this is going to be that exact thing. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so I'm going to check it. Is RM adjacent? Oh, well, look at this. RM isn't even in the same triangle. So what we need to realize is that angle J, if I come back up here, it's the first letter, it corresponds to angle E. So I'm going to check the cosine of E right now, which is EM over RE, adjacent over hypotenuse. It's not that. Cosine R, so T corresponds to R. The cosine of R would be adjacent, RM over RE, but again, it's not in the same triangle, so that's the tricky part of this. In that triangle, it would be TM over JT. It's not that one. Tangent of T, so opposite over adjacent. So that would be JM over TM, but again, we're not in that one. So if I come over to R, opposite is EM, so it's not that one. So it's got to be this last one. Tangent of E is the opposite over the adjacent. So I'm going to go back to this small triangle. The opposite is TM, the adjacent is JM. That's why it's number 4. Again, it's just asking for all of these things. Depending on which function it's talking about. It's just looking for that. And it was also making you realize corresponding parts at the same time. We have another right triangle here, all labeled for us. What's the measure of angle A? So I'm going to label my opposite, my adjacent, and my hypotenuse based on my reference angle. From here, I know that I would be using the cosine function. So cosine of what is 9 over 14? Whenever x is the variable, that is where you will use the inverse button on your calculator to solve for what the angle is. I don't know what that is, so I have to hit the button. That would be 9 divided by 14, 49.9947, which rounds to 50. When instructed to find the length of HJ, Alex wrote the equation sine of 28, okay, equals HJ over 20. So they wrote opposite over hypotenuse. That works. While Marlene wrote cosine of 62. So hold on, let's think. The 62 had to have come from somewhere, and it's right here because that has to add to 90. Yep, because those two have to add to 90. All three have to add to 180. Cosine is HJ over 20. That's correct. Are both students' equations correct? Explain why. So you could go into a long explanation of how sine is opposite over hypotenuse, which Alex did, and Marlene did cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, and show that they're the same. Or you could say sine and cosine are equal when the angles add to 90. So they are both correct. The angles add to 90. So they are both correct. That's that thing again. It's sine A equals cosine B. That's what they're asking about. But again, there's multiple ways to explain why they're both correct. Next question, they gave us a ramp. And it's connecting to the ground to a loading platform 4.5 feet above the ground. The ramp measures 11.75 feet from the ground to the top of the platform. They want the angle of elevation formed by the ramp and the ground. So there's my x. opposite hypotenuse. This is a sine question. Equals 4.5 over 11.75. So again, this would be an inverse sine in your calculator, which I need to calculate. Okay. 4.5 divided by 11.75. That's 22.518 nearest degree, so 23 degrees. Find the value of r that will make this equation true. This is going to simply be 90 minus 73 equals 17 degrees. Explain your answer. Sine and cosine, it's the same thing I wrote a second ago, are equal when the angles add to 90. I'm not writing it all out. It's a tiny space. A carpenter leans an extension ladder against a house, such shown down there, 30 feet above the ground. As shown in the diagram below, it makes a 70-degree angle to the nearest foot. Determine and state the length of the ladder. So in this picture, the ladder would be here, which is x. Excuse me. So I have my opposite and my hypotenuse. So this is a sine question. The sine of 70 equals opposite over hypotenuse. Again, this would be a division question because x is on the bottom. So 30 divided by the sine, not the inverse of sine, of 70, and that's 31.925 and change, and it wanted to the nearest foot. So notice I always go back and check that. 25. So the nearest foot would be 32. A ladder leans against a building. The top of the ladder touches the building 10 feet above the ground. So we're here, 10. The foot of the ladder is 4 feet from the base of the building. The angle the ladder makes with the ground is there. So this is opposite over adjacent. This is a tangent question. So tangent equals opposite over adjacent. Because I'm looking for the angle, I'm using the inverse of tangent. And then substituting 10 divided by 4 into that, I get 68.1985, yada, 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 yada. That's going to round to 68 degrees. We have another diagram with a ladder 15 feet above the ground, placed with the angle of 75 at the ground, and it wants the length of the ladder. So this is almost the identical question with different numbers. I'm going to be using sine because I have the opposite and my hypotenuse to my reference angle, and I will be dividing because x is on the bottom. So 15 divided by the sine of 75 degrees is roughly 15.5291. So 15.5 would be to the nearest 10th. Okay, question 20, 21, 22. These are all going to be much more complicated questions. So these would be like 4-pointers. As shown in the diagram below, the ship is headed directly towards the lighthouse, 125 feet. It wants to know how far the ship traveled. So this is what it's looking for. To answer that, we are going to solve for DC and then AC. By subtracting those two, we will have the total calculation. So in both of these cases, 125 is the opposite, x and y are the adjacent. So I'm going to need to set up two different tangent functions. One with 7 as the angle measure with 125 over y, so the whole distance. And then one with 16 as the angle with 125 over x as my ratio. So again, I'm solving for x in one, y in the other. Both will be a division. So I'm just going to calculate each of those separately. So 125 divided by the tangent of 7. So this one's going to give me 1018 and change. And then if I change that, and I can just copy and paste it and then just switch the angle out for 16, that one is 435 and change. Okay. So now I'm going to subtract those two values. So I might just write like subtract, but this is right what I'm typing in to the calculator. So you want to show all of that beautiful work to get credit. And I have to type it in simultaneously. But always, always, always show your work. Okay. That is 582.1165. As long as I didn't type something in wrong, to the nearest foot, that would be 582 feet. The next one is a similar question, but they're actually doing it with angles. So you're still going to find your two right triangles. So here is the first right triangle. That angle will be X. And then my second right triangle, just trying to get a different color here, is this entire right triangle. And that angle I'm going to call Y. So it's going to be that same setup where you have to do two different ones. It's going to be tangent again, because this is opposite. This is the adjacent. I don't have the hypotenuse. For solving for Y, I need to use 72 as my opposite, whereas 75 is the adjacent in both. And for X, I need to use 12 as the opposite and 75 as the adjacent. If you use 60, that unfortunately is incorrect. In both of these cases, I'm looking for the angle, so I'm going to use the inverse of tangent, 72 divided by 75. So I get 43.83086 degrees. And then for the other one, again, I can just copy and paste and change that 72 to a 12. I get 9.0903. From here, I'm going to subtract those two values. Okay, so 43.83086. Oops. And then I'm subtracting that from 9.0903. I get 34.7. It wants it to the nearest tenth. So 34.74056. That would be 34.7 degrees. So same thing, but they did it with an angle, whereas we've done it with distances a lot. All right, this one has a lot to it. They actually don't do 6-pointers anymore, so I'm just going to give you the quick rundown of what you would do, but they don't do 6-point questions other than the proof anymore. 8 meters closer is there. 1.7 above the ground. Okay, so this is actually a two variable one. You need H here, you need X here. You would set tangent of 52.8 over X equal to tangent of 34, or not equal to, excuse me. What did I just do? Tangent, let's try that again. Tangent of 52.8 is equal to X over H. There we go, opposite over adjacent. And then tangent of 34.9 is equal to, this distance is X plus 8 over H. You would cross multiply this and then use substitution. Once you had substitution and solved for X, you could solve for H, and then you'd have to remember to add 1.7 at the end of it all. These two are the ones you want to be more concerned with. So that is it for this video. I hope you have a fantastic day.